Welcome to another episode of Sustainable Goat. I'm Steve Cassingham, and I interview the greatest of all time in sustainability from the past, present, and into the future. In this episode, I talk with Javier Marti, founder at Divirod. Water has become a major topic of conversation that will continue to grow over the coming years, and whether it's droughts, flooding, agriculture, or even water accumulation around homes, monitoring water is becoming an increasingly important thing that we need to understand, because we need to understand where our water goes. Divirod's providing the solution for this in a way that increases the accessibility to data and is helping communities around the world. So let's dive into the conversation with Javier. Thank you for being a part of this. I'm happy we're able to finally chat because I know we've had some busy schedules back and forth being able to find a time. So thanks for taking the time to hop in.
You're very welcome.
So I'd love to start with, diving in a little bit about your history and kind of where you're originally from and, what's your background? Who is Javier Marti?
So I am originally from Spain. I was born and raised in the south of Spain. Spain is part of the Europe, but Europe has a lot of differences from north to south. So sometimes I feel I was much closer to Africa than to Finland for obvious reasons. So living in the south of all my life until the age of 25, then I started working internationally and I haven't stopped since.
What was your first international job?
So I was recruited by the European Space Agency. So I went to live in the Netherlands and I had a contract for 1 year, which was extended. And in the end was like 16 years in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is very small, so no matter where you live, you're center. So I lived in between The Hague and Amsterdam in a little town called Leiden, which is a university town, very lively, beautiful, lots of canals. I got the privilege of owning one of the beautiful Dutch houses along the canal. So my house was built in the 1620, which gives you an idea of the sort of history that there was in my house at the time.
What an incredible place to live. I have family that lives in the Netherlands, and I've always wanted to go there. I've always been fascinated with, having a house on that canal. What was that like from, I guess, like coming from south of Spain, being more in a desert environment? What was it like moving to an area that was a little bit more green? It had water flowing. What was that like for you?
Well, it's a big contrast, and not only in terms of the environment and the climate. Spain is very sunny. It's not that desertic, but it's certainly more desertic compared to the northern European countries. And the Netherlands is a beautiful place. I mean, it's so nicely organized. There's a lot of people living there, so there's a cultural shock from the amount of people. It's one of the countries which is more superpopulated in the world. I mean, it's not at the level of Bangladesh or India, but it's certainly the density of people is very, very large and very high. And for me, living in the Netherlands was essentially a big experience because it rains a lot. There's a lot of water, as you say. There are canals that sometimes they freeze in the evenings, they freeze in the winters, and then you can even skate from them. So enjoying the water activities like skating on canals and lakes, going out in the boat in the summer, having water very close to you at all times felt very, very good.
Have you always been kind of a water person?
Definitely. I used to be a ski instructor back in Spain when I was in college. And I enjoy the presence of snow in the winter. Privileged place in Granada in the south. You have the mountains at 45 minutes away, and then you drive south, and then you are at the beach in 1 hour. So in the month of April, you go out there and you ski in the morning until you get the slushy, mushy snow, spring snow, and then you just decide, okay, let's take the car, let's go down to the beach. Long days and then it's funny because everybody gets tan, from here up. And then from here down, you look like a match, like very, very tan face and very pale skin and the rest.
That's super cool. Wow, what a unique opportunity to be able to experience both of those in literally the same day. It almost reminds me of that Top Gear episode they did a long time ago where, he went to the mountains and the beach all in one day. They did a little bit more extravagantly, but what a cool experience. And so what did you study in school, and what was kind of your expertise? I mean, you mentioned getting this job in the Netherlands, but what was kind of your inspiration behind that? What was your interest?
So I was, since I was a little kid, I was intrigued by space and I wanted to become an astronaut. And so I studied engineering in college. I got my degree in telecommunications engineering. I did a major in radio frequencies, so antennas, telecommunications, and radio and waves and etc. And that brought me to, one day I was attending a presentation from somebody who came to talk to the university and explained what they were doing and calibrating a satellite that was passing by very close to our college. And at the end of the talk, I was like, I gotta talk to this guy. So I just went straight up to him and said, hey, I want to work in space. What do I have to do? The guy looked at me and said, okay, well, why don't you write a letter to this person? So he gave me a name and an address, and there I go in the typewriter, clack, 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 type in the letter. A month after, I get a letter back saying, hey, here's a program that you can apply. I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening. So again, typewriter, clack, 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 getting all the references, all the paperwork. And a month and a half later, I was offered a possibility to work in space, and went there for the first time. And as an internship, it was the coolest experience of my life. And I came back and started working as a full-time employee in the when was that? 1994, 5? I don't even remember. That's bad.
So what is it about space that fascinated you? Is it the expansiveness? Is it the fact that you kind of get like this almost top-down view of Earth? I mean, what kind of fascinated you about the idea of space? Because normally most people think space and they're just like, cool, go to the moon, explore, what's out there in the universe, but there's many different facets to it.
Yeah, that's right. And for me personally, it was a combination of not only technology-wise, it was the state of the art, what was done for space or for military was always at the forefront of technology. So space for me was a very attractive from the technology standpoint. And then, of course, the other thing that was really attractive to me was the fact that space is the large. I mean, how large and vast it is the fascination that we're in this world. We believe that we are quite somebody, but at the end of the day, we're minuscule in this universe. And that perspective and the infinity and concept and the how vast everything is always some of the philosophical questions that go around my head many times, and you think about, well, what is in the space that really is so fascinating, and it's simply the vastness of the universe.
That's super cool. I think there's so many questions that remain unanswered, and I don't think can be explained honestly, because you're thinking in such a different way than we're used to. We're so used to thinking, in the 3D and not thinking about anything outside of that. And I think that space opens up so many more, just holes for that to be able to explore, and deep rabbit holes. So you worked in space for a little bit, and then when did you actually come to the US?
I came to the US 8 years ago. I was at the time working in Chile. So I had moved from the Netherlands to Chile. And I was hired to lead the technical development and the operations of a project which was publicly funded and was intended to look at ecological regions in the United States. So looking at ecological, continental scale ecology. So identifying patterns of what happens in Northern Oregon, how it affects the southern states, for example. So looking at the big shift, the big gradients across the continent. So I ended up leading the entire project, and it was a fascinating experience going to visit all the places in this country, which are absolutely phenomenal. Like everywhere from Barrow, Alaska, down to Puerto Rico, Hawaii, all the continental US. it was a fascinating experience. On the flip side, working for public institutions is always a very slow thing. So at the end of the day, I got tired of the bureaucracy and the slowness and sometimes the ineffectiveness of working for public institutions, and jump out.
So what did you notice in terms of patterns? I mean, if you can dive a bit deeper into what were the ecological patterns that you were looking for? Was it, heat? Was it weather? Was it everything? What was kind of your main focus? And what did you kind of find in those patterns?
So that project in particular was looking at the impacts of climate change. I mean, it was very premature at the time, but you were already seeing exceptional circumstances like very hot in Alaska, the permafrost melting. And we already saw the indications of that action of climate change at the early in the project while we were constructing and building things. The other thing that is looking at is the use of the land, so land use, invasive species, and the the whole aspect of combining all the ecological parameters and impacts and everything that is making our, let's say, ecosystem change and evolve. So we're looking for indicators which were indicating trends, indicating changes, indicating early alerts and warnings to what could happen if invasive species are coming into the southern tip of Florida, how they come into the country. I mean, there's a sort of there's a very convoluted thing, ecology, and but it was looking at mostly for trends and early indications of how things are changing, because they're changing.
Yeah, and if you can dive a little bit deeper on how things are changing, I think there's a lot of news and there's a lot of articles and there's a lot of back and forth, back and forth. This is saying, that is being said. I mean, you were kind of more feet on the ground there. What did you kind of notice in terms of trends?
I noticed a couple of things. I mean, I noticed that the project was very focused on the scientific aspects of it. However, what I think it was a significant gap at the time was the distance between the scientific goals and the impacts to society. So how that affects to you and me? How do we benefit of having that infrastructure, producing data out there, and what is that we're gaining? I remember a conversation with one of the leaders of the Obama's administration, and he was asking for questions which were societal questions, and how can we use things? And I looked at my peers and my colleagues, and they were looking down into the science and into the aspects of the next paper and finding a trend, and that was fantastic. But we didn't get answers to the other levels, and there was a gap, a distance between the science and the real impacts into our lives. How can we incorporate all that data, all that knowledge, and convert it into policy, into things that help us becoming more resilient? And as you can see, it's we're still trying to figure it out, right?
Totally. Yeah. And I love that you said resiliency, because I think it's such an important word for what's kind of going on. We have to be resilient. We have to innovate change. It's not just going to happen naturally, or it's not going to come from a place of people stopping consuming or traveling. And it's hard to make that society shift when society is going a direction, but how do we innovate in a space to actually make ourselves a little bit more resilient? And I think data plays a huge role in that. And I'd love if you could dive in a little bit on just the idea of what data can do and the power of data, because we've been collecting numbers for decades. But the speed at which we can correlate these points and the speed at which we can actually make better hypotheses and even test them, it's kind of rapidly changing how we actually approach problems.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal conversation to initiate, because data is everything. I mean, if you think about knowledge, we know because we have evidence of what's going on. And until you have it in a form and fashion that you can do something with it, it's simply an observation that is gone. So data has enabled the capturing of information and the storing information for future use and for future understanding. I do think that not every piece of data is useful and relevant. There's a lot of data that is superfluous or data which is duplicated, but there is a relevance of understanding and gathering key and strategic data that allows us to understand what we're living and how we should be adapting. So one of the things is that we've been measuring things for forever and in different ways and fashions. A couple of things. One is that the events are changing, the climate is changing at a rapid pace. I mean, the hurricanes are becoming more and more prominent and more frequent. Heat waves and cold weather patterns. And I mean, everything is kind of upside down. We're beginning to be very, very dramatic. And the one thing that all this past data collection is that it was good for the purpose of the past habits, which were like very steady. The situation was more of a status quo. Yes, it was increasing, but not rapidly increasing. It was not changing as drastically as it is today. So we need to adapt and get data, which is helping us understanding this rapid change and what is coming up. And for that is, I'm a firm believer that we have to get more data in the areas where can really help us, make a change and make an impact into the way we live, and we're going to be living in the future.
And so would you say that kind of how you interpret data is more the important side of it? I mean, data collection obviously is important, but as you mentioned, a lot of that data is either superfluous or just not necessary to finding answers. Is that kind of where the human expertise comes in? Because we put a lot of focus on AI and quantum computing and stuff to be able to do simulations and see what could be happening. But is it more human of what are the things that we are putting into this equation?
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying that when you have a model, garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you have crappy data to play with, you're not going to have very good results. So when you look at the usage of data, it's important to think about how that data has been collected. Where is it collected? How often is it being collected? Is it being collected in a way that can be compared? Because I have data of one color, data of another color, data of a third color, and when you try to mix them together, there's room for gaps and interpretation and errors and lack of accuracy. So it's important to have a standard way of measuring the observables that we're looking at, so that we can implement models which are going to become more accurate and more certain. And then, of course, the extent of where we collect data is really, really important. So we think of, for example, we're looking at water at the coastlines, and 96,000 of coastline in the United States are covered by 225 active NOAA stations recording tidal changes. If you think about a tidal surge, you just need 1 inch additional, 1 more inch of water at one place to get flooded. We don't need, like a foot. You need 1 more inch just to get running water in your streets, running water in your property. So having a very small number of places where you're collecting data doesn't give you the ability to look into what happens in your neighborhood, what happens in your property. So you really need to increase the extent of collection of data.
Okay, so I want to go a little bit deeper on this concept. One inch to actually make, I mean, a flood essentially. I think most people assume that any type of tidal wave or increase in flooding, flash flooding, that it has to be a lot of water. But you mentioned 1 inch. Why? Why is that the case?
So let me go back. When I moved to Colorado, 2013, we had a very intense rain, which led to flash floods. And we got my neighborhood. I live very close to the mountains in a canyon, and there was this little creek with a very, very small bridge, which became a raging river, very wide, very deep, and very savage. And that water actually came through the entire neighborhood, affected my neighbors across the street. And I was very, very fortunate because my house had a creek along the side, which actually was filling up, but it didn't fill up to the top so that water never came into my property. I was looking and observing what was going on, and people were putting sandbags and barriers, and yeah, water was coming in, but just 1 more inch of water makes the water strong enough to actually overcome the sandbags, get into basements, get into places. And water doesn't stop. I mean, it doesn't ask for permission. It will come if it's massive. It will come. So that 1 inch of really made a difference between me and my neighbors. My neighbors got about 12 foot of water in their houses. Yeah, I dug out the mud and stuff from their places. But my house, I was very fortunate. It didn't flood, and because that ditch was 1 inch deeper than the amount of, I mean, literally, it was really at the verge of spilling over, but
Wow.
it didn't.
Wow, sad to hear like what happened with your neighbors, and obviously very fortunate for you that it didn't happen. But yeah, I mean, 1 inch that does make a huge difference.
Think about a glass of water. If you put a little bit too much, of course it's going to spill, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to remember that.
So what you were working on now, let's get into what Divirod is all about. Tell me why you came up with the idea, and what is the need? And I know you touched on that a little bit with kind of all of the NOAA monitors, and there needs to be more data points to actually paint a better picture. So if you can dive in a little bit about Divirod, why you started it, what was your mindset around it, and why is it a need?
Yeah, so Divirod, my company Divirod, I started up back in 2016 out of the urge of understanding better water at large. Moisture in the ground, precipitation, water in reservoirs, ability to access water, ability to control water when it's in wild form, like the flooding events, the coastal erosion, you name it. Water is everywhere and affects us all. And to me, it was appalling to see that we had technologies which were able to tell us that, you ordered a pizza, you can see the pizza, you can track the pizza across the city getting to your plate. You can call for an Uber and get to know if the guy's around the corner or not, and even which side of the street is going to pick you up. I mean, it's unbelievable what we can do with technology. However, if you think about water, there is not a single place where you can go and say, I understand what's going on. I know that maybe in 30 minutes, I might have to lift up the computers from my basement because I need to put them somewhere else because I'm going to get flooded. We have absolutely no idea. There is a lot of modeling right there, and they're all based on, again, the sparse amount of data collection points, which is insufficient, especially with, when you're talking about the changes that we're experimenting nowadays. So I wanted to be able to provide that vision, that map of water, of the dynamics of water, understanding where it goes, how it comes, how it is. Is it available over there? Is not? Is it forming water in the mountains when we have a snowpack? How much is going to be able to hit my glass of water at the end of the day? So that was something really, really deep in me from my early days, and I decided to get on this cruise and founded Divirod back in 2016, already 5 years from now.
Wow, and I think water's becoming a bigger topic now, but I would imagine it was a smaller topic in 2016, a lot more niche. What do you think is the biggest challenge that we have with water? Is it the amount of water? Is it the usage of water, the consumption of water? What is the problem that water is having right now?
That's a very good question. I would like to, I would correct you if I may, Steve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Water has been always a big topic. Unfortunately, the awareness of the importance of water is oftentimes misregarded. And not only for water consumption, but also, as explained, all the flooding events and stuff like that. People who live by the water understand that water is super beautiful, but at the same time could be scary. So the awareness now that all the press is talking about the drought in California, the drought in the Colorado River, unprecedented this, unprecedented that. It's simply just more propaganda, quote unquote, more advertisement, more awareness altogether, which are making the population to become more susceptible about, water is important. The thing that I like about doing with water, for me, the importance is that, and that's why Divirod is a little bit of a special company in the water space. We're not looking at water in any other form that water as a liability. What are the water risks? And water risk could be the drought, could be massive amount of water, could be the scarcity, could be the transportation, could be how it affects your property, how it affects operations of businesses. It's water extends as a liability in many, many levels. And that's the niche that we have taken. So let's look at water on a massive scale and good understanding of how this could impact organizations, corporations, businesses at large in running their operations. Of course, apart from the businesses, how this affects the citizens and people who live by the water. Can they have access to much better data, much better understanding, better forecast, better predictions that can help us prepare, can help us increase that resiliency against water risks.
And so what's the solution that you guys came up with in starting this in 2016?
So the solution was twofold. First of all, we needed to come up with a method to capture data in a very standard way, which is giving us the ability to compare data from one place to another, making it cost effective so that it can scale. And last but not least, coming up with a delivery mechanism, which is providing access to the data. And our business model runs into data as a service. And depending on the data needs that you have, you will subscribe to one of different tiers of services. We don't think it's important for people to understand how instrumentation works. Let us solve this problem for you. Just focus on what matters to you, which is how water as a risk can be understood by me or by my corporation, and how can I get myself ready to anticipate and plan ahead of time.
Got it. And so you guys basically developed a network of sensors that can paint a better picture of what water does, essentially, is what you guys did.
Yeah, so we built this infrastructure, and we keep building the infrastructure of which is a network in itself. It's like when you think about the cell phone that you have, you don't put up, you don't buy the services for getting a cell tower in your garden. You actually get your cell phone, and then you subscribe to the service of using your phone and the data on your phone. We're doing exactly the same. We're building up this network, which is geographically extended, and we have intent to cover as much as we can of the not only the U.S., but we have eyes into East Asia, eyes into Europe. We've already put and deployed units in both Europe and Japan, and in many states here in the United States. And we intend to expand as much as we can wherever water is a problem.
And so how has that kind of helped? I mean, what's the data that you guys have learned so far, whether it's the amount of data or the quality of that data? Have you guys gained some insight around the usage of water outside of, just these raw numbers? Does it paint a better picture of what the traditional model of data has been?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is to augment the data availability. So there is all this publicly available data. There's all this satellite imagery that is available. And as I said before, it's difficult to intercompare. And everybody who's in modeling understands what I'm talking about. So what we're trying to do is to augment the availability of data by creating a new data layer, which provides additional insights of water as a liability, as a risk. And that is the mechanism by which you can come up with enabling additional services. Like you think about, for example, when Google Maps came alive, Waze introduced the traffic concept, and boom, traffic-enabled transportation and logistics and so on and so forth. We want to do the same. We want to enable that action related to the to the insights of water. And thus far, if you try to look for water data, it's really scarce. It's really difficult. It's very varied, and it's very different. And it's taken out of archaic mechanisms like putting a stick on the mud to a very costly large infrastructure at the harbor, just looking at a single point of on the map. So it's really an opportunity for us to make an impact and to change the way people are looking at water.
And how does that help the value for whether you're a company, a municipality, a private citizen? What are the actionable things that I guess they get out of knowing this data? Is it how to use that water more efficiently if they're a farm? Is it how much water they can expect around them when they produce things? I mean, what are kind of those tangible things that I guess people can get out of aggregating this data?
Yeah, some of the use cases that we have one product called Roof Watch. This is for corporations that they have large warehouses and large flat rooftops, and those rooftops are accumulating water, apart from dirt and other stuff. But they accumulate a lot of water. They see the rain, the precipitation, and they have to be cleaned and free of debris so that the water runs through the drains properly. So our product is providing these people with a constant monitoring and constant roof watch 24/7 that is providing an alert if water is forming on top of a drain. So they had a problem with a blockage in the drain. So they don't have to be constantly going up to the roof. They just go whenever it's needed, and they can take an action. You can also plan, if you look at the data in the immediate, what I would call the immediate need is taking an action, like unblocking a drain on a rooftop, or putting a floodgate in a certain place. Then you have the longer term risks that we deal with, which is as you understand how things are occurring, you look back, you look into the trends, you can then start planning, what else will I do differently this year to minimize all the impacts that I've seen last year? And then you can take action on those things. So Roof Watch is a good example. We have another one, which we call Divirod Water Watch, which is looking at all the water in reservoirs and rivers, fluctuations of water levels to the negative and to the positive all across the country. Then we have another one, which is Coastal Watch. Everything is watch because this is what we do. We watch, and we provide you that service. So we're looking into tidal changes, wave activity, coastal erosion, and everything that could impact coastal communities. And if you're a real estate developer and you're going to develop an area, of course, you want to know with the new normal, the new climate situation, what is it I have to do in order to prevent water coming from the sea into my property?
Got it. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I guess from a data standpoint, that really helps, because I mean, even from the Roof Watch standpoint, I think a lot of people might forget that water is actually very heavy. And when you think you go get a gallon of water at the store, you 5 of those are you're holding quite a bit of weight. And when you put that across the roof of a structure, specifically a flat one, that can be a lot of weight on the roof of a structure. So I'd imagine for commercial, it actually has quite a bit of application in terms of safety and sustainability of the building as well.
Totally. And that's important to the person who's trying to get an immediate action out of it. But now think about all these people, all these data points in aggregate, how much information this is providing you. Like, for example, we're now deploying in Florida a huge extensive network. We want to hit the number of 300 units on the ground before the end of the year in Florida, so that every time a hurricane comes by, we can track the hurricane, we can track the event, we can monitor before, during, and after. So we can provide useful information for insurance purposes, for rehabilitation purposes, for reconstruction, for all the actions that are taken after an event of this kind.
I mean, I think that's a huge benefit, because you think about building, any type of levee or anything to block the rise of water, you can actually anticipate in a more accurate way where that's going to happen, rather than just it happened here this time, but next time we know it's going to happen probably in this area based on the trends.
Exactly. And that's all. And that's the beautiful thing of having data. If you don't have data, you just don't know. You cannot even anticipate. I mean, how our knowledge has increased is because we have accumulated experiences. So you have to think about data in the same way. You're accumulating data to build that experience, to build that knowledge, to build the awareness. And with that massive amount of intelligence, you can transform it into what's going to happen next. How do I have to behave? What do I have to do differently? How can I become more resilient, et cetera, et cetera.
And I know that there's a lot of talk right now just in terms of agriculture and water availability from that side. That I think has more of an effect on society than a lot of people see, because if you don't have as much water, you can't grow as many crops. If you don't have as many crops, prices go up on food, and then that hits the consumer on that end. And I think it's a little bit of a long tail of when that actually does happen. But where's the benefit do you see in being able to monitor the water specifically for agriculture? Because that's such a huge part of society.
Yeah, that's been in our minds for quite a long time. And I'm talking about Divirod. We actually started thinking about, can we improve the way farmers irrigate their fields to get a more efficient crop in the year, to get a better yield, and to get the quality of the crop increased so that they can sell at premium prices and so on and so forth. The difficulty with farmers is that the small farmer has a main struggle, which is surviving the season. So if he doesn't have a good harvest, he's broke. I mean, and farmers, unfortunately, the ones who are sustaining us at large, are not very profitable. And actually, people who are doing this because they believe in providing through the supply chain. But from a business standpoint, farming is not very lucrative. So they don't want to spare on water or fertilizers or anything that they need to do in order to save their crop. So it becomes a little bit of a chicken and egg situation with farming. Of course, if you look at the large farming companies, and then you're talking about the giants of agriculture, not mentioning names now, but all these companies, of course, if they reduce their water consumption or their water bill, it has a big impact on their balance sheet. So they really want to do something about it. But at large, I think all the water rights, all the irrigation permits, all the irrigation rights, it's something that is needing a big revision and a big focus of attention. But it's not happening. And until the point that people are really accounting for, okay, we understand that water is a commodity, is not a given, it's actually a very limited resource, then we will see things like water being traded in Wall Street, people litigating because or states litigating because you're consuming more water than necessary out of the Colorado River or out of the reservoir XYZ. So we're gonna be looking at a big change in that aspect, and I think platforms like our platform actually can provide a very good service to that. But again, it's at the intersection, it's at the collision between the public interest and the private interest. So it's a difficult area to get into.
I was having a conversation a few weeks ago with somebody about energy and how, the idea of living completely off grid. So that way, if there's any private and public, combativeness going on, you're kind of free of that because you are as off grid as possible. Do you think there's a solution that Divirod can play in providing the data to know if somebody can be off grid with water? So if they get a certain amount of water on their property, would they know how much they're getting in a way that they could collect the water and know that they could live off of it?
I think Divirod, what we will provide in going forward is a very good accountability of the water available. So we have a unique accuracy. We measure levels with a millimeter precision, and that provides us a very good understanding of how to treat water as a commodity. So if you think about 1 millimeter of water across a large reservoir, 1,000-acre reservoir, And let's take an inch times 1,000 acres. It's a lot of water. It's millions and millions of gallons of water. And this amount of water is actually has a tag price. And people don't understand that when they're opening their tap, actually that water that comes apparently for free is not for free. And it has a value. And it will have even more value going forward because of the scarcity of water. I think we can play definitely, and we're preparing ourselves to do so, a very important role in accounting and translating water into that financial asset that people own or don't own. And that's where our technology actually and our services can provide, can give a lot of return to our customers in that regard.
Nice. And how does your technology scale? So, I mean, obviously the units talk to each other. You have constant data, but as 5-10 years down the road, how do you stay relevant? Because I mean, it's almost like you try and use an iPhone 4 now, it's not going to work very well. How does that work in terms of your technology? How can it be scalable over the years?
That's a super interesting, and I'm going to be a little bit sarcastic here. So let's take the case of Bob. Bob goes to the reservoir every morning to look at a stick in the reservoir and gets a note on his notepad and puts that data onto Excel sheet. And then it's further translated into the state. And people in the state are using this data point taken by Bob every morning. How does it scale? So we have survived all this long with a Bob kind of thing and very archaic technologies to account for water. Our scalability is actually astronomical compared to that, just to begin with. Off the plate, in 5 years from now, when we have a pretty large coverage of geographical coverage, plus all the history that we're going to be accumulating in terms of data availability, our scalability going forward is going to go growing into different regions, going into different markets, because the power of a network of when we start collecting data out of a network of this kind, you're thinking about, I'm going to get this data and this is going to be showing me this. This is what you know. But the most interesting thing is what you don't know that is going to come out of that data. So the type of trends, the type of insights that this massive collection of water data and information is going to provide us, it has to have its own secrets, its own new use cases. And we're going to make it so that people could actually come up with new use cases using this data. And that's what we want to do, is to enable all that projection, all that scalability of markets and the scalability of coverage. And heck yeah, we're going to be relevant 5 years from now and 50 years from now. So my intent and the intent of everybody in the company is to leave a legacy and to become, the person or the company that you associate with when you think about water.
I love that. I really love that. And it's so interesting. You mentioned, Bob measuring something every single day, because I mean, when I was growing up, my grandfather always had this piece of plastic over the edge of his balcony in California, and it would capture the water, and every single day he would write down how much water, and he had data trends of 30 years of water at that property of how much he got. But yeah, to be able to have that from thousands of places and to be able to get the data and have it be millimeter accurate, because who knows if he measured it at the same time every day? Who knows if it had been warm on a summer day and some of it evaporated? Like that accuracy that you guys are able to provide can actually paint a better picture of water, which I think is so helpful. You collect a lot of data, I mean, also using satellite technology. So there's a little bit of still space involved in what you guys do. So you've kind of kept a toe into space, if you will.
Yeah, we actually, our technology is very sleek, and the way we capture data is actually has two components. One is we're leveraging on the existing satellites, which are transmitting signals all around the planet 24/7, and those signals carry an energy. So what we're doing is to form a radar with our instrument and those satellites. And we take the satellite as the emitter of that radar, And as it bounces off the ground, anything water related is going to pick up some sort of a signature, physical signature of what we're seeing as an observable, which is then captured by our receivers, our instrumentation. So we have our system can be considered as dozens of satellites out there bombarding the earth with energy, and we're listening to the echoes of those energies everywhere that we have a foot on the ground. And that is very interesting because we don't have to launch more satellites. I hate to say, but I don't like the fact of, people sending satellites out there. We're going to be in a Wall-E situation very soon if we're not careful putting junk out there. And I'm talking somebody who's been working in space for quite a long time, but I don't want to see that happening. All these micro constellations and mega constellations we're going to pay the price for that going down the road, but we don't have to put any additional infrastructure in space. And we have yet a unique resource that we're leveraging on all these satellites, providing us energy to capture the echoes of water on the ground. And yes, we're going to be, quote unquote, deploying quite an extensive number of instrumentation on the ground, but our instrumentation fits in the palm of my hand, can be put on a rooftop. You don't even see it from the outside. It's very stealth and very easy to install. So we are actually scaling that very nicely.
That's really cool. And I love that you touched on the amount of satellites and that you guys don't need more. Because I don't know if many people realize how many satellites are actually going around our Earth 24/7. I mean, when you go out on a really clear night, you can look up and every once in a while you can see a satellite coming across the sky and you're like, wow, that's really cool. But you don't realize that there are thousands more of them that we don't see. I'm just curious on diving a little bit deeper on the idea of just how much is actually outside of our atmosphere right now.
I'm going to give you another example in comparison, because people will say, wow, the space is huge. I mean, come on. And I will tell you, yes, it's very unlikely that we're going to cover the sky with satellites unless we do something really, really bad. However, think about you're in a pristine beach somewhere in let's say, Costa Rica, beautiful country. So you're in a pristine beach, and then you see like a floating bottle and another floating bottle. And you say, like, crap, this pristine beach should not even have a plastic thing on it. But yet I'm seeing that thing floating out there. So we have to think the same about a space. I mean, it's not a trash depot. It's somewhere that we're not going to be dumping junk on the space because it's infinite. We have to preserve what we have around ourselves and be very effective at what we're launching and what we're not launching. The same as we're preserving our coastal areas and our oceans by not throwing garbage on the ocean. It's exactly the same. Yes, it's a huge ocean. We're not going to see that, but more and more we're noticing now the plastic influence. Poor sea turtles getting entangled into nets, into plastic bags.
Yeah, I mean, you can only solve the problem that you kind of can see, and hindsight's always 20/20. And so, of course, 40 years down the road, you're going to be, oh man, that was a poor decision. Why did we do that? But is that kind of what you guys are aiming for, is to kind of be able to paint a picture that, you can look back and almost predict forward, and in a way that is a little bit more reliable, not so much just let's see if this works and let's try and figure it out later if it comes up with more problems.
In Spain, we say you have to grab the bull by the horns, right? And I take that to the limit. When I see that this problem that we have in front of us, which is the water availability, the water risks, water as liability in general, what we really need to do is essentially face it and say, okay, we have this motto of saying, stop guessing, go and measure it. Go get the actual data. Why do you have to guess? I've seen models of this property, in flood watches and, flood maps that have been provided by modeling people. And according to that, my house was flooded in 2013. They have no clue. They don't have data to actually build those models. So we want to say, stop guessing, put a monitoring device. Let's understand what it is in the place that matters to you. If it is your dock, your pier, your property, you're next to a river, you're next to a reservoir, you're looking into the water that is providing massive amount of drinking possibilities to communities. Let's be serious about it. Let's just stop guessing. Let's do it proper. We have the technology. Let's use it.
And so what can somebody do that they want to understand water more, they want to be more passionate about it? How can somebody, I don't know, take action on their end, even in a small way? What can people do that kind of gives them a tangible way to move forward in this whole process?
So one thing that we're doing in order to deploy in Florida, for example, is to actually ask for people who really are experiencing problems with water. And we're asking for help. We're happy to provide free shipping and devices so that we can put them in their places. If it's, if it is a real location for us to deploy. So we are open to actually people just contacting us and say, hey, I got this problem. We see this recurrent. We would love to know more. Can you help us? And what we would normally do is our people are looking into the maps, looking into the area, and then we decide, okay, we can place here, here, and here, then we get you covered if we don't have you covered already. So we're actually opening up a marketing campaign at the moment, which is going to call for citizens in Florida to actually contact us and participate and contribute to this network. Because yes, we're a for-profit organization, but at the same time, we want to give back. And there's going to be a number of services which are going to be available. So let's just stop being protective about, oh, the data is mine. No, the data has to be shared, open source, and being available to do something more with it.
Yeah, data has been a huge debate as of late in terms of who owns data, the privatization of data, specifically when it comes to, the Googles and the Facebooks and all that kind of stuff, data collection. But yeah, as you mentioned, in this case, it's not personal data. It's not anything having to do with the person. It's actually helping your community in such a more meaningful way that kind of data sharing, I think, people can get behind that because it's something that's going to help people at the end of the day. And it won't just, yes, will it, enable you guys to profit more and grow? Of course. But that's the point of having a business that you hope is going to grow. But at the end of the day, you're not doing it at the expense of others. You're actually providing a service that helps others. And I think that's a very important distinction for people to understand when it comes to data. There are different forms of data. And I think that data right now is getting slammed so hard because the way people understand data is that it's everything about them. But it's really a global thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting comparison. When we are talking to, for example, a city, and the city says, hey, but we own the data is ours. You cannot do anything with that data, and say, okay. So I'll tell you the next thing. Have somebody paid you the rights to use the data that they collect from satellites? So the satellite is passing every week over your heads and is collecting a picture. Has somebody paid you the right to get that picture? Not at all. So who owns the water levels? Who owns the tidal data? Who owns the water, the rate of precipitation? No one. Is collectively owned by everybody. It's not even ownership. We're here just like visitors in this world, and our time is very limited compared to the extent of the planet lifetime. So I would say people should stop worrying about owning data, but should they start thinking about sharing data and making contributions to things which are going to be reverting back into them. Yes, through maybe services. Yes, maybe through better forecasting. But in the long run, it's a cycle of the business, and it's a cycle of the benefit from what you do can have an impact on the road in my society and my community.
Do you think that there's a vision in the future of where this particular type of data is decentralized to the point where nobody owns it, where, blockchain essentially, that it's put on a public blockchain, that nobody owns the data, but it's verified and kind of just lives forever?
Yes. And our data is essentially mutable, and that's why I was talking about before about the accounting of data. And it's traceable to the origin, and it's traceable. It's a perfect candidate for blockchain, and it's one of other technologies that we're going to incorporate going forward. So is this something that would be owned by no one or by us or by, difficult to say. I mean, I'm a little bit lost, to be honest, with all the trends in data ownership, because things are changing rapidly, and they're going to change even more rapidly going forward.
Definitely. I'm glad that you guys are just thinking about that in general, just because I believe it's, just from my perspective, I think it's Internet 2.0. It's going to enable so much more availability of technology and also accessibility in the sense of newer solutions that work faster. I mean, once the blockchains obviously get to a point where they can handle the speed and stuff. But few last questions. One of which, do you remember your first sustainable purchase that you made consciously, where you said, "This is a sustainable product. I'm going to purchase it because I want to make an effort to be more conscious about my purchases"?
I actually don't remember. I don't have an example to give you, but I come from the southwest Spain, where I used to go to the local market, which is like a market. It's nothing. It's not a farmer's market. It's not like an event on Saturdays. It's the daily market where the guy who goes out and fishes and bring the fish to his own stand, or the guy who goes out and has his field and is selling fruit and vegetables. So maybe that's why I don't remember, because I might have been doing it all my life, buying to the local producers and sustaining the local economy, without even noticing it, without even thinking about it. I do think that's when I came to the US for the first time, and my landing was in Boulder, and I went to Whole Foods, and it cannot be more organic than that, right? Whole Foods in Boulder. And I came across this thing of, oh, you gotta buy this. It's organic. So everything is organic, isn't it? Like, it's not produced. So I have to say I've been a little bit spoiled to have access to, let's say, sustainable, normal practices rather than mass production practices. And that's why you caught me off guard. Like, when did you buy it? Yeah, I think I've been buying all my life.
That's great. I mean, yeah, and I think the picture of sustainability, a lot of people miss out on there, that, local is sustainable, because it doesn't have to travel as far. Supporting a local community is such a decision in itself to be sustainable, and also, buying things that will actually last. I think that's also sustainable. Just because something was made with minimal impact on the environment, but if you're replacing it every 2 years, that adds up too. So I just think the picture of sustainability is so much different than a lot of people paint it. It's not just the thing with the label or the thing that was made out of recycled materials, which are all good at the end of the day, but it's also thinking, how can you do it locally? How can you just live a life that is just more sustainable?
Definitely. I think sometimes we just purchase more than we really need. And, my daughters are telling me and my wife, you guys should buy more clothes. To say, why? Oh, because this is like a very old house. This is like 20 years old, right? I say, yes. So what? It's okay. We don't need to have any new addition. We bought, we buy stuff because we need it, not because we need to replace it. It's a very good point that you're making, Steve. It's not only about buying some kind of label product. It's about, not buying too much, not consuming too much, and becoming more sustainable.
At the end of the day, fashion is very cyclical anyway. So if you keep that thing for 20 years, it'll probably come back into style anyway, and everybody's going to be loving it. Where's your favorite place to enjoy nature, and to kind of get immersed in it and enjoy the world that we do live in? And I know you've traveled a lot, so this is a harder question for sure. And if it's a few places, that's totally fine.
Well, I think one of the most beautiful places that I've ever been is in the southern Patagonia in Chile. Patagonia is a very extensive place, lots of dramatic natural geography, and glaciers and mountains and rivers. I mean, everything is big and dramatic. And the nice thing about it is that this is still and is not spoiled by lots of tourism. It's just it's going to be spoiled because people are traveling more and more nowadays. But if I had to choose a place, that would be it, Patagonia in Chile.
Wow. Yeah, I have not been down there. It's on my bucket list. And funny enough, you are not the only person to mention that area on this podcast, which is very interesting to hear. There are a lot of beautiful places on this earth, but to have a place that kind of really holds that power is pretty special. That's cool. Thanks so much for being a part of this podcast. I really enjoyed having you on it and to be able to talk about water in such a real and tangible way, in such a data-driven way. I think a lot of times we just look at what's happening in the world and that is what it is, but to have data that supports it, and the fact that Divirod is providing a solution to all of this, and providing a platform for people to actually build more solutions in the future. I just think, hats off to you for coming up with the idea and really going after it and owning it. And I just think it's really commendable for sure. What are the ways that people can reach out to Divirod, can get units, can get in contact with you to learn more? What's kind of the best way to get in contact with you guys?
Well, our website is the best entry point, divirod.com, divirod.com. And there is a lot of possibilities to click contact us. And if you live in Boulder, just reach out and give me a buzz. I'm happy to take coffee now that we're, let's say, freer to do those things.
Awesome. Well, cool. Thanks again for being on the show, and excited to kind of share this with the world.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me and for having me here. I really appreciate it, Steve.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sustainable Goat. Javier's story is pretty amazing, and I'm super grateful that I got to share it with you. I encourage everybody to check out Divirod on their website. And if you're in an area where you are concerned about water, or where they're kind of focused, which is like Florida right now, sign up on their beta testing program and get involved. You're only going to be providing data that's really going to help the community. Privatized data, it's safe, but it's really going to help in this understanding of what the bigger picture of water looks like. So thanks again for listening to this episode of Sustainable Goat.